Hello and welcome to Decision NYC with Ben Max. I'm Ben Max, your host and the executive editor of Gotham Gazette. The 2021 New York City election season is well underway and it's poised to be the most significant municipal election in decades. All of city government is on the ballot, and because so few incumbents are eligible to run for their current seats due to term limits, New Yorkers are electing many new office holders and the next wave of leadership for our city. There will be a new mayor of New York City elected here in 2021, as well as a new city controller, several new borough presidents, many new city council members, and more. A number of incumbents are eligible for and seeking re-election, including the city's public advocate, and there's a very crowded and competitive race for Manhattan District Attorney, and still more. Party primaries are set for June, and the general election in the fall will culminate on November 2nd. This is the first full set of municipal elections that will feature both early voting and the new ranked choice voting system, which only applies to party primaries and special elections. We'll have a separate show just on ranked choice voting. This city election cycle would be of enormous importance under more usual circumstances, but it's unfolding at a time of great crisis for our city, raising the stakes of the decisions that you, the voter, will make. The new wave of city leadership will quite clearly make or break the city's recovery from the devastation of the COVID-19 pandemic and its many impacts on health, family, jobs, education, housing, and much more. It's also important to note the city faced several crises before the pandemic, several of which have only gotten worse. So it's an important time of choosing here in New York City, and we're pleased to bring you this new series of interviews with the candidates running for citywide offices, mayor, public advocate, controller, as well as interviews with candidates for other offices, and there will be debates. But these one-on-one conversations will help you to get to know the candidates better, learn about their backgrounds, their platforms, where they stand on key issues, and their vision for the future of New York City. We hope this and other interviews will help you sort through your many choices and make informed decisions when it's time to vote. So today's interview, joining me by Zoom, is Guiddalia Emilien, a Democratic candidate for New York City Mayor. Guiddalia, welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, how are you, Ben? Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your background, who you are, where you come from, what brings you to this race, and then we'll dig into your platform.
So I'm originally from Haiti. I've been living in the States for about 30 years and in New York for about 12 years. I'm a mom. I am a small business owner, of course, an immigrant. What brings me to the race? I think it's because there's something very eerily familiar to what's happening in New York lately when it comes to my background and why I'm in the States and why I came to this country in terms of safety. I've seen New York become very unsafe. Crime has surged specifically during 2020, but it started before that. And my concern is with small businesses shutting down, people may get desperate and you're going to see an even higher crime surge. Gun violence is something that I'm all too familiar with growing up in Haiti, even though I was lucky enough to be part of the upper middle class, but it was around us nonetheless. We had massive 40 feet high walls to keep criminals out. So basically we lived in cages. And so there's something happening here that makes me very concerned about New York. I know people think that Haiti and New York are so far apart in terms of these concerns, but I see it to be very similar. I'm very concerned about the shutdown with all the small businesses. I think we all should be concerned about that, being that small businesses make up 65% of job creations in the US and in New York. So
let's dig into a few of those things in a moment, but tell us a little bit more about your small business.
Well, I'm a real estate business owner. I own a boutique firm in New York. We service 4 boroughs with the exception of Staten Island. And I've been in business for 3 years now. I started my company, but I've been in business as far as like working in the field of real estate for about 11 years now.
Explain the jump, explain deciding to go from running your real estate business to running not only for public office, but for the highest public office in the city. I hear you saying you have some serious concerns about small businesses and public safety, most pressingly, but why run for mayor?
Um, I feel like this is my perception. I believe that there's an idea that you start from the bottom and you rise through the ranks. But from what I'm seeing, everybody that's doing this are playing it safe. And they're not taking bold actions to create changes because they want to rise through the ranks. And I think that's problematic. I think that individuals who go into office shouldn't think about making this a career. They should think about, when you go in there, making as much impact as possible to positively affect as many people as possible. That means that you don't think about, well, what to do on my second term. You think about right here, right now, what do I do? And this is why I'm looking at the mayoral office as one of the highest position in terms of the ability to effectuate change, which is why I went towards the mayor position, because for me, it's not about being a career politician. It's not about moving through the ranks. It's about what can you do while you're in office and how many people you can impact.
What characteristics and what skills do you think you bring to the table, especially?
I think leadership skills. I think being that, for example, I'm on the ground all the time working with small businesses. They are my clients. I'm on the ground all the time working with individuals looking for housing in New York. I understand how expensive housing is in New York. I understand all the things that comes along with a homeowner pricing their rents, because I deal with it on a regular basis. I deal with people on a regular basis talking to me about how they need to live in a certain neighborhood for the sake of their children's schools. They want to live in a certain neighborhood for the sake of safety. So my constant, on a daily basis, I constantly deal with these things, job safety, safety in general, placing people in the perfect zip code for them to go, their kids to go to a certain schools, which doesn't make any sense because your school should not be dictated by your zip code. Businesses trying to open shops, especially small businesses who cannot afford it because of the rising rents for commercial businesses as well. And I think that being that the main concerns that I have, which are safety, businesses and housing, I deal with it on a regular basis. I hear the concerns of the people on a regular basis, and I'm able to tap into that to implement certain policies, I should say.
So let's come back to those issues in just one more minute. But continuing on the sort of readiness for the job theme, the city government includes well over 300,000 employees and $90
Yes.
billion budget. Say a little bit more about your preparation, your readiness to take over leading city government at that scale.
I think it's about having the right team, hiring the right people to do the job, because obviously the mayor is not a single person at the helm of the ship. There are many with him. And I think at the end of the day, it's about hiring individuals who are very experienced in the field to come on board to ensure that everyone has the proper support, including the mayor itself.
Say a
So
little bit more about your ability to do that, your approach to hiring, your approach to management. What does that look like?
I would say, to me, that would look like tapping into the resources that the city already has with people who have who are in position of leadership, whether it is looking at the individuals who already work in these particular sectors and looking at their ability to bring about change. Meaning, how would I say this? Meaning that if, for example, we have a number of agencies that have proven they have massive results, we can tap into those resources and putting these people in a position of power to continue towards that progress.
Are there
And we have very talented, I'm sure we can find very talented individual within city administration already that should be in a particular position, as opposed to just hiring people at random because they are, let's say, friend of the leader of the city, or they have some obscure background. I think it's about looking at the people who are already there. If you're talking about transportation, we're talking about looking at who's best fit for transportation. The people that are already there who have brought about the massive change that we need, why not put them in a position of head of transportation? If you're talking about homeless care, we need to look at the agencies that create the most change in the fight to eradicate homelessness and put them in the position to do that. We have to look at, for example, the way I look at it is, we have to look at the people that bring about the most, I don't want to reiterate. For example, the agencies that we already have that are failing, we have to look at getting rid of these agencies and funding more of these agencies that have proven results.
Which city agencies do you think are doing the worst job, and which city agencies do you think are running fairly well at this point?
Well, there is Bowery, which I think is great. They're doing a fantastic job. There is BRC, which I think I have some questions about, just because I walk by BRC all the time, and the homeless are spending quite a lot of time outside of these shelters and so on. And I have to wonder, why is that if they're poorly managed? There's a lot of questions about the management and the the cleanliness and et cetera of these homeless shelters. So I think we need to look at agencies such as the Bowery that are doing great jobs and trying to copy whatever model they have in place in terms of offering programs, services, and how they're bringing about change, and seeing how we can implement that elsewhere.
So let's come back to your core issues, public safety. What do you think needs to change there? What would you do as mayor? Do you have an approach to public safety that reimagines what the NYPD's responsibilities are? Where do you come in on the funding of the NYPD debate? What are some of your thoughts on policing and public safety and crime?
I think we should not defund the police. I think this idea of defunding the police is to me, I cannot even imagine it, because, for example, my hairstylist last summer in August, um, her son was killed by what is a drive-by. How do I tell somebody like that, who has to go to the police to seek answers, to seek uh, results for the murder of her son? How do I tell her what I'm going to do next is defund the police? I mean, there are issues with the police. I think we should deal with that on an individual basis, which means that when there is police misconduct, these individual police officers should be brought to justice. And the police officers should not be allowed to police themselves, meaning that whomever is overseeing misconduct of the police should not be the police itself. It should be a completely separate organization. Nonetheless, I think we do need the police. I think, if anything, we need better policing, and we need individuals within our communities that reflects us, meaning looks like us, policing our communities. We need community policing, which means to me that the police should be coming into the community board meetings, having conversation with parents, having conversation with teachers, principals, and so on, so they know who their children are, who the parents are, so we can build relations with the police, as opposed to ostracizing the police. It's not helpful to do that, especially when you see in our communities, when guns are blazing, the police are running towards the bullets while people are running away. There are too many issues in our communities, and too much gun violence for us to then kick out the police out of our streets, because there is no way that any civilian is skilled to deal with the crimes that are on the street without any police help. So I think what we need is a better relations with the police. I think we need police training. I think that we need every police officer to wear a camera. So if there is any question about their behavior, we have it recorded, and it could be, the
So,
video speaks for itself.
so there is a outside agency, the Civilian Complaint Review Board, that does have oversight of police misconduct. There's obviously an internal affairs bureau at the NYPD. All patrol officers do wear cameras. There is extensive training. Are there things that you would do differently than the system that currently exists in terms of either police tactics or police accountability?
I would say police tactics would be de-escalation. I think the police are very quick to pull their guns. I don't think that this is necessary. I think there's other ways to deal with this. I think we have to look at outside of New York, how other police officers are dealing with de-escalation. I know that there's something I've been looking at in New Jersey. They've just enacted a de-escalation tactic for police officers. I think to train police officers not to shoot to kill, because it seems like part of their training is hyper aggressive. This needs to change. As far as, once again, I think community policing is a big deal. The police that are in our communities are interacting with the folks there when they're called in for crime or something is reported or they're patrolling. I think that has to be done very differently because they're not part of that community. They get to go home to somewhere else where they don't have to see people that look like the folks that are in the low income community. And I think the perception on the part of the police towards that community is that there is a lot of criminal elements, and they probably don't see us as just, hardworking citizens who are trying to survive in that environment as well. So community policing, where the police officers are in these community board meetings, interacting with as many people in the community as possible, us having access to the police officers by text or by even Zoom conference call, doing that on a monthly basis so we can get to know these police officers and they could get to know us, I think would be very helpful.
I want to move on to small businesses in a second, but I saw on your website that you support broken windows policing. And so maybe
Yes.
you can comment on that a little bit, why that's a theory and a sort of philosophy of policing that you support. And then you also note that you think, basically community members, residents need to take more responsibility for safety in their communities. So
Yes.
maybe if you could just touch on those two things before we go to a different subject area.
So what I've witnessed, I live in Manhattan and I've lived in many places in Brooklyn as well, many neighborhoods in Brooklyn. What I've noticed is as you start to see things start to go downward in communities, where there is buildings are left undone, unkept, buildings are boarded up, you see that garbage proliferates on the streets and things of that nature. You see that the homeless starts to pretty much spend more time on the streets. I coincidentally see the rise of crime at the same time. Now, at this point, I don't believe it's a coincidence because I've lived in New York for 12 years now, and I've seen it happen in so many neighborhoods. And I've seen it happen, have seen the reverse happen as well, the opposite of that, I should say, happen in so many neighborhoods, where as you see the buildings are being cleaned up, as you see like garbage is off the street, there's less homelessness and so on. You see that there's less crime. So I believe that there is something to be said that communities become very vulnerable when things start to go down, whether it's their buildings and so on. They become vulnerable to criminals who may believe that, these are the people in the communities may not care so much. They're not looked after. They're not policed well. So communities easily set up shop without having any pushback. So I think there's something to be said about broken window policies. And the other thing you mentioned about people being more involved, I think what's happening specifically in the Black communities is that a lot of single moms are working 2, 3 jobs, and they don't have enough support for these children that are get out of school. They don't have anything to do, and they easily end up in gangs and other activities that they shouldn't be involved with because they don't have any after school activity and enough support for these mothers. I think it's time for us to come in as a community and lend a hand to everyone in the community who is working 2, 3 jobs and look after these children. And I think there used to be, when I was growing up, there used to be home ec after school programs such as woodshop, cooking, and so on, language class. I took Spanish for 3 years. I was part of the Spanish club. I was part of the wood shop club and so on. All these things kept me busy. It kept me interacting with school, with education in a different way. And by the time kids are done with that, they're done with school, they're done with all these activities. Once they get home, it's all about food on the table and going to sleep because they're exhausted. Right now, we don't have anything for these kids to do, and it's easy for them to end up in trouble. This is why I say the community as a whole, whomever, whether it's like business owners who can offer them like internship programs and things like that, just for us all to pitch in to help these children, because a lot of these single mothers are working 2, 3 jobs and just can't do it.
Let's talk about small businesses. Thousands have been closing, some of them temporarily, hopefully, and unfortunately, many of them probably permanently during this COVID crisis. What would you do as mayor to help small businesses either hang on and survive, reopen, or to help some folks start new businesses as things hopefully improve with the vaccine rollout and getting beyond the worst of the COVID crisis?
I believe that the 25% opening up of, let's say, restaurants, for example, is not going to be enough. Not many people know this, but restaurants provide about 17 million jobs in the US, and they also provide about $1 trillion in economics, as far as economic contribution in the US. And New York is very known for its bustling restaurant businesses. Right now, more than ever, I think we need to step on a provincial and federal level to support these small businesses. I think that 25% capacity will not do. We need to bring it to 50% capacity. There are other places who have done it successfully. If you go outside of New York, you will find that they have done this successfully and they've done it safely. As a matter of fact, I believe restaurants are the #1 place for people to congregate, especially because the science shows only 2% of spread is communicable through the restaurant businesses. The restaurants have gone above and beyond between mask, cleaning, separators, and all kinds of things to keep the people who enter their space safe. And I think at this point, they need our support. That's funding, federal funding. We need to access more PPP, and it needs to be access for all, because a lot of individuals have had trouble accessing PPP. The PPP was not extensive enough. It went for a couple of months. After that, the restaurants were left to their own devices, which is why a lot of them will not come back. And I think that we need to look at taxes. A lot of small businesses are, going under because the taxes are really high. I think we need to look at tax breaks for small businesses particularly, and we need to look at ways to implement low rents. A lot of the reasons why these businesses have gone under is because they were already struggling the last few years. The rents have gone through the roof. And I think it's a chain reaction, because property rents in New York property taxes in New York is already very high. And typically what owners will do, they'll pass down certain overheads to their tenants. And this is on a commercial and residential level. New York City should be operating at a low tax for small business owners and property owners, because it just doesn't make sense for this trickle down effect that's happening on for the small businesses. So we need, of course, the other thing I believe we should do is a common sense deregulation of small businesses. I'm not sure if you know this, but a lot of small businesses are getting massive fines by the city. In the meantime, dealing with the fact that they barely can make it and they're barely bringing income and they're behind for months on rents.
We're just in our last few minutes here, so I want to get to a couple quick things, and unfortunately, these answers will have to be on the briefer side. But I noticed also on your website and your platform that you are a strong supporter of charter schools. Maybe you could just take a minute and explain how you would approach that as mayor.
So this goes back to looking at proven results. The way I look at it, charter schools and private schools, have proven that they can do well in educating our kids, and they can do well in making sure they can push the kids to the next level for university or entrepreneurship and so on. I do not understand why we're not using whatever model that they're using and implementing that in public schools. I've gone to public schools, I've gone to private schools. There is a massive difference to their approach to education. I'm against rote learning. I'm pro pretty much, development of intelligence is not about teaching people how to remember things. We can't have a one size fit all for education. Children have different type of intelligence, spatial intelligence, and all kinds of different things we need to look at. In the private school system and the charter school system have been good about looking at all these different ways to approach, I should say, to learnings that have proven success. And we need to look at these and implement them in the public school system.
Two more quick questions. Mayor Bill de Blasio, who you're seeking to succeed as mayor, he's term limited out. What letter grade would you give him for his tenure, and a very brief explanation?
I would say I would give him a D, and some people would go as far as giving him an F. My problem with de Blasio is that there's been a lot of programs that he tried to implement that has failed, and he has not kept how would I say this? He has not kept an eye on all the agencies and making sure that they're bringing in the goods, meaning that they're proving results for all the things that they're supposed to do with the city's money. He has failed to handle this pandemic in a way that I would say would make New Yorkers happy. The crime has surged during his administration. Homelessness have gone from 20,000 to about 63 to something to 70,000 during his administration. So that to me is of concern.
Guiddalia Emilien is a Democratic candidate for mayor of New York City. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you. Have a good one.
And thank you for watching Decision NYC with Ben Max. Key decisions for New York City voters are coming up in the June primaries and the fall general election. There's a lot on the line for all of us and the future of New York City. I hope this conversation and others are helpful to you. Until next time, I'm Ben Max. Goodbye.